and is to come. Wherever the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to him who sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him forever and ever.
But that sounds a lot like hell to me. And our sermon today is, does hell exist? So I'm going to start out with a little anecdote about my mother, of which I have endless supply of anecdotes about my mother. Her and my father some years ago, this is probably 15 or 20 years ago this happened, they were going to a Lutheran church in North Wales, Pennsylvania. It's near the booming town of Lansdale, if you don't know where North Wales is. And the senior pastor who normally preached was on vacation, and he didn't preach that day. So instead they had the associate pastor preach, and he didn't preach very often. And I won't mention his name, but his really full-time job was he was the chaplain at Graterford Prison in Pennsylvania. So he got up and gave his sermon. And in the course of his sermon, he made light of the fact that there could actually be a hell. He made light of the fact that there could actually be a devil. And in Bill Maher's style, he said the idea that there's somebody running around with, pointy ears and a tail and a pitchfork, that's all just ridiculous. And of course, none of us actually believe hell or the devil actually exists. Well, as it turned out, this particular congregation of people at this Lutheran church in North Wales, pretty much all of them believe that hell existed, and pretty much all of them believe in the existence of the devil. My mother never recovered from that sermon, even though she lived another 15 or 20 years. And I continued to hear about it every time I went up at Christmas time. That this dastardly pastor had preached this horrifying sermon. And she couldn't even understand how a Christian minister could say things like that. And on that score, I actually somewhat agree with her. Now, she wouldn't have known the term social gospel. That would not have been a term my mother would have been familiar with. But the person giving that sermon was very much on the social gospel side of the spectrum. And he believed that the reason we have churches and we read the New Testament, why bother with the Old Testament, all that judgment stuff. But the reason we read the New Testament is because it tells us how we should treat other people. And it's about love, and it's about giving, and it's a model to follow. And all this stuff about hell and resurrection and Son of God, we don't have to pay any attention to that. The thing to pay attention to is the Beatitudes and treating other people well. Well, I'm all for treating other people well, and I'm all for the Beatitudes. But I don't think if you're a Christian, you can toss out all the rest of the stuff either. So let's get back to the specific topic. So does hell exist? What does the Bible say? Because sometimes the Bible's kind of ambiguous about stuff. Like, is Satan mentioned in the Old Testament? I don't know. We could have an argument about it. I don't know if we'd come to a conclusion. But in my opinion, this is one of those topics. It's not especially ambiguous. At least in the New Testament, it's pretty clear. But let's start with the Old Testament. Well, if you're on the side that hell doesn't exist, the Old Testament's your place to go. Because there's hardly any references to hell as we understand it as Christians in the Old Testament. Instead, there's this shadowy thing called Sheol, which is mentioned 66 times in the Old Testament. 17 of them are in the Psalms. And you may say, well, Sheol, that's hell in the Old Testament. Well, not really. Because we're told in Job that it's a place appointed for all the living. Well, that means good and bad would both go to Sheol. It's referred to as a place of no return, a land of oblivion. In some places, it seems to be used as a synonym for death. So instead of my Uncle Elmo died when he was stealing a chicken and somebody shot him, it was my Uncle Elmo went to Sheol when he was shot stealing a chicken. But there's a couple places where we get a little glimmer of the New Testament understanding of the afterlife. Psalms 139:8 talks about the fact that God is still with people in Sheol. Well, Sheol's just oblivion. Well, how's God still with you? The big one, Psalm 49:15, and actually says God can raise people from the grave. Wow. So that introduces that idea of resurrection. Another important one is the one that Deborah read a moment ago. And I'm just going to do the highlights. Daniel 12:2 says, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. Some to everlasting life. I would posit that's probably heaven. Others to shame and everlasting contempt. And I would posit that that's hell. Daniel 12:13 says, as for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. Well, in Christian terms, that would be heaven, or a life with God, or hell, or life without God. So moving to the New Testament. Oh, there's all kinds of references to hell in the New Testament. So if you're going to make your argument for the existence of hell based on the Bible, that's probably where you're going to want to start. And this is where I would have had my great debate with the chaplain of Graterford Prison had I been there that day. There's actually 3 different words that are sometimes translated in the New Testament as hell. The most important one is Hades, which means abode of the dead. It's kind of the Greek equivalent of Sheol. There's Gehenna, the Valley of Lamentation, or a place of burning. This is my personal favorite because just like the town in Pennsylvania, which is burning eternally because of the coal seam, the Gehenna Valley is where they used to dump their garbage in Jerusalem, and so the methane gas would form, and it would catch fire sometimes. So they'd say, well, you're going to the place of burning, Gehenna, which is a garbage dump.
Makes me like hell.
And then there was a third one called Tartaro. But there's all kinds of references in the New Testament to hell. Matthew 13 talks about the fiery furnace and the weeping and gnashing of teeth of people who are going to go to the fiery furnace. Also in Matthew, we're told that hell is the place where the condemned are sent for eternal punishment. That seems pretty clear to me. So either it's hell or it's an eternal Justin Bieber concert. I don't know which one, but it's got to be something. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? That's Christ saying that. Thessalonians talks about everlasting destruction and separation from God. He will punish those who do not know God and do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus. They will be punished with everlasting destruction and shut out from the presence of the Lord and from the majesty of his power. And Pope John Paul II used to talk about hell in terms of hell wasn't so much a place, but it was a mode of existence where you were separated from God from eternity. So that one would match up with John Paul II's view. 2 Peter 2:4, angels that sin are sent to gloomy dungeons in hell. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them into gloomy dungeons to be held for judgment. Gosh, all this resurrection and judgment day and heaven and hell, they all seem to be connected in Christian theology. That's amazing. Now moving into Revelation. Revelation 6:8 talks about the 4th horse of the apocalypse. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and all hell followed behind him. And power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. So when this rider of the apocalypse, as we refer to them, and I'm not talking about Notre Dame's front line back in the 1920s, hell follows behind him. Revelation 9, 1-2 talks about an abyss and smoke from a gigantic furnace. Now, it might be talking about Sloss Ironworks, but Sloss Ironworks is not eternal. It no longer belches smoke. This is an eternal fire. The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it, like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and the sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. This is where we kind of get the impression that the abyss or the fiery furnace may be kind of Satan's clubhouse. Revelation 11:7. We're told that the beast, or the Antichrist, comes from the abyss. Now when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. So why does the beast come from the abyss if it's not Satan's clubhouse? Revelation 14:9-11. A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on the forehead or on the hand, he too will drink of the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. Good battle hymn of the Republic imagery there. He'll be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment rises forever and ever. There is no rest, day or night, for those who worship the beast in his image, or for anyone who receives the mark of his name. Eternal punishment, and there's all this smoke and burning sulfur. And if we get nothing else out of our descriptions from the New Testament of hell, we know it's hot. I would even go so far as to say it's hot as hell. Because that's what it is, it's hell. Revelation 19 and 20 and 21, taking bits and pieces. 19:20, but the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who had performed the miraculous signs on his head. So this is the beast from the sea and the beast from the land. With these signs he had deluded those who had received the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. The two of them were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. 21:8, but the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. And this is the second death. Well, gosh, there seems to be an awful lot of references that bad people are going to go to this place of burning. And there's all these different descriptions, the lake of sulfur, the fiery furnace. It's hot, and it's a place where bad people go. It seems pretty clear to me. Revelation 20:13, eventually hell will give up its dead for judgment. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them. And each person was judged according to what he had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. Now my purpose here today, because I know you all want to get out, before 3 o'clock. My purpose here today isn't to try to draw a distinction or even attempt to understand the distinction between the abyss and the lake of burning sulfur and the fiery furnace and some of these other references we're seeing. But it seems to me pretty clear that a place called hell exists. It's hot. Satan hangs out there before the second coming of Christ. And after the second coming, the bad people are thrown into hell. And they're separated from God forever. So that's kind of a quick view of what the Bible has to say about hell. So I guess my view is on a lot of these things in the Bible, whether they're miracles or stories like Noah's Ark, that sort of thing. My view is kind of like Martin Luther's. Martin Luther was a doctor of theology. He was a very learned man. He was a great writer. And people would ask him, well, do you believe all that miracle stuff in the Bible? And he said, well, if I really believe that God is omnipotent and that God can do anything he wants, I guess if he wants to send a flood, he can. So yeah, I believe in Noah's Ark. And it's true about the different miracles and whatnot too. And I kind of feel that way. Now, where I will agree with a former chaplain of Graterford Prison, I don't think there's a devil with horns and a tail and he's all red and carries a pitchfork. I don't think that's what the devil's about at all. But you'll notice none of those passages from the Bible had anything to do with the pointy-eared guy with a pitchfork. That's all stuff that's happened over the years. Does hell have multiple levels? I don't know. The Bible didn't say anything about it having multiple levels. Now, a guy named Dante in what was the 14th century, he decided that hell had multiple levels, and he described the river Styx that you pass over, and you had to face the beast, Cerberus or Kerberos, which is now a encryption methodology. And all that stuff's cool. But when I'm talking about this hell exists, I'm not talking about Dante's vision of it. I'm not talking about some cartoon character with a tail. I'm talking about what it says in the Bible. And what the Bible tells us, in summation, I said it before, but we're told for somebody to walk away with your message, you got to say it 3 times. So this is the 3rd time that I'm saying it. Satan's clubhouse. It's hot and unpleasant. And after the second coming, when Judgment Day occurs, that's where all the unbelievers are going to be thrown. So does hell exist? Yeah. The hell that's described in the New Testament exists. Does Dante's Inferno exist? I don't know. But I feel pretty confident that the hell that exists in the New Testament exists.